Welcome back, you hear Goldberg. Today I want to talk about game and personality, which are very contentious subjects in the generalized manosphere. As some of you might know already, those who are more black-pilled say there's a primacy of looks. The red pillars tend to push back and go, no, if you just learn game is what makes the women hard. I'm so sorry, the women wet. Yeah, sorry. Some red pillars, you're not entirely certain. But in any case, that's their argument that game is more important. And there's probably some elaboration that's called for because I've never been able to get someone to provide a concrete definition of game. They'll always use this very abstract language that tends to lead you back to looks, money, and status anyway. The best definition I could get was from Rich Cooper's book, where he goes, game is like the attributes you have, the way you carry yourself. But even he admits if you don't have LMS, it's only going to get you so far. This is different from the traditional red pill PUA language of 4 or 5 years ago, where it was a game is all that matters. In fact, they would advertise their products, the hot, sexy models on the covers of the books and the articles, the courses. But realistically, the short dude who's not that good looking is probably going to struggle to pick up even someone who's his looks match. And in fact, Alan Roger Curry, who is a big red pill PUA type, in his book, he admits, he's very honest, if she's not interested in you, you're not going to be able to say something that's just going to make her attracted to you magically. So that's where a lot of the divide comes forth. And I think it's crucial that we, have a broader discussion so that we're not just, singing in the rain or the darkness. Now, if you read David Buss's research on the evolution of desire, he says that these concepts of being suave, using game, seduction are grossly misunderstood, because your end goal is to get a woman into her comfort zone where she feels safe and secure physically and psychologically so she can begin to open up to you. Now, that sounds great, but it's not just using some pickup lines and strutting around acting like an alpha male. Attraction has to be there. We already heard this from Alan Roger Curry. And the whole notion of making her feel safe, there was a PUA some years back, he did an article and said, immediately go up to the chick, put your arms around her, give her a big hug so she feels like you're in control, she's safe. This was a guy over 6 feet and with an attractive face, Caucasian. Now imagine the difference, because one of the studies I include in the Black Pill book is from Rice University, I believe, and it discusses how a stranger who is attractive tends to be more trusted. You're given this kind of premium, at least to start, of okay, not a big deal. So if a good-looking guy approaches a girl and just gives her a hug, she turns around, oh, hi there. But if some short dude who's less attractive goes up and tries to do the same thing, who's going to get the charge? Who's going to get the bad rep? Who's more likely to walk away like, oh, no big deal, I actually like it? You got to be realistic. So oh yeah, I've got great game. That's just something dudes use to stroke their own ego because they don't want to be realistic and say, okay, she found me to a certain threshold of physical attraction to where my personality mattered. This is what red pillars don't tend to tell you, because that would kind of destroy their, their business model. As far as personality is concerned, you need to appreciate where it stems from. The research I've seen indicates around about 50% of your personality traits are genetic in nature, which is probably why you might have heard growing up that you're just like your dad or just like your mom. That's not just some little social thing people do. It's based upon what we have observed and been able to study. And that's one of the reasons why, you might say, oh, the other 50% is obviously environmental. Not really. The environmental aspect is not quite as overbearing as you might be led to believe. And I think it follows then that, as one researcher said, you can reframe your personality to a certain degree. So what I did, not very outgoing, I went and worked in a coffee shop, in a restaurant. So I had to be interacting with people, asking them questions, being curious about them. You do the whole Dale Carnegie, and you can benefit to a certain degree. So today, yes, I can hold and initiate conversations fine. At that same junction, I didn't turn into some bubbly, extrovert, feed off of everyone in the room type of personality. Now, to be fair to red pillars, having a certain modicum of social skills is going to be important, especially if you're like a mid-tier normie or a little bit below average, because your best options are going to be in person. Now, even if the girl does approach you, if you luck out, you can't just be totally, devoid of any ability to communicate. So that's true. We cannot run away from the fact at the same time that a lot of young people have no personalities. If you try talking with them, they can't maintain eye contact in many cases. They don't really know how to have an interaction that's not digitized. So this is a very important dynamic to appreciate, because you go around like, oh yeah, just, go and start talking to people. Well, that individual is not well socialized themselves. If you're in the Zoomer kind of age range, it could be more problematic, and it's going to get worse with the COVID lockdown. So all this stuff I talk about in the book because I want it to be as thorough as possible in getting people to understand what's going on. Another genetic aspect to personality is the fact that, at least in a number of studies, there are indications to where if you're physically attractive, people rate your personality as better. And this is something I've certainly seen throughout my life, is that you might see a guy, he's good looking, and girls will say, he's got a great personality, which he really doesn't if you interact with him. It's just the fact that they are already physically inclined towards them. So it's not to say there are no exceptions and no variations, but we have to be willing to, as adults, or many of you might not quite be adults yet legally, but to appreciate it so that you're not going around like, oh yeah, it's just about having a personality, which, no. Having a personality can work in some cases. It can be one facet, but it's not going to be the overpowering dynamic if you simply are not at a level where she finds you to be attractive. I should say, though, definitely don't, discount the whole value of having social skills and getting to know people. It doesn't just have to be for romantic purposes. That's something that's certain black pillars fall into that rut where they go, oh, I'm not even going to bother anymore. Don't have that mentality, because it's not good for your own growth. All right. But you also have to understand the elements of attraction matter. It's not just your personality. Of course, game and personality matter less and less in the age of digitized dating and texting, because how precisely are you going to communicate game over a text message? I mean, you can try for sure, but if you don't meet those physical prerequisites, you're going to have a rough time. And because, as I've noted before, I want to be, respectful of red pillars and PUAs, I've read a number of their books, and I've tried their methods, okay? And what I found is this: unless she finds you attractive, that stuff doesn't really matter. I'll give you two quick examples. This was on Hinge. This Hispanic chick, probably like a 5 or 6 out of 10, early 30s. So not exactly prime real estate, 18-year-old cheerleader or anything like that. But she had mentioned in her profile that she was interested in reading books and a good cup of tea, which is like, oh, that's kind of neat. I'm big into drinking teas because they're antioxidant. I prefer them to coffee in general. Coffee's not all bad, though. And so we had a nice conversation about books and tea. And this was probably for about 4 or 5 hours in the evening, back and forth. Not straight always having the conversation, I promise you. But she was like, oh, this is amazing to meet someone on here who actually likes to read and is into this stuff. I was like, okay, things are going well. This was a Friday night. Saturday morning, because the last time we communicated was around 11 probably. Saturday morning, I get this very early text from her. And I was saying, okay, maybe she works she said something about medical. So I figured maybe you work like a 12-hour shift on the weekend. So I was like, dang, are you working at 12? Because it was quite early in the morning. No response after that. Now, the very fact in that case, I was expressing a personality. I wasn't just going for, let's smash or something of that nature. Showing interest, having a more comprehensive personality, having stuff you can talk about. That didn't really matter because she either wasn't attracted or she was, but there was someone better available. And more than likely that person who was better didn't have a better personality. They were just a better physical option. And so you have to be able to accept that instead of going, oh, no, it was about game. My personality wasn't good enough. How much better is your personality supposed to be in that circumstance? This is what the PUAs will never really answer, because the reality is they can't. Had this other Caucasian chick who mentioned in her profile she was interested in architecture. So I strike up a conversation. Local architecture changes over time, some historical pieces. That, I would say, is indication of a decent personality, because most dudes, they're not going to be able to have that discussion. Even if they Google search, it's not going to make sense for them. So we kind of have a decent conversation. She drops off, comes back like 2 days later. Oh, I'm sorry, I was busy with something. Recommence the conversation, drops off again. What exactly was wrong with my personality, right? The fact of the matter is, once more, she probably had a better option, someone she was more attracted to. It's not that complicated. And now the PUAs will say, well, it's a numbers game. But if it's a numbers game, then game doesn't really work, right? You're just saying if you approach enough people, probability basis, you'll find one that's actually attracted to you. But this goes to, why do you say you can get these hot girls and hot models as long as you use game, but in reality I got to keep approaching until more than likely this girl's, okay, I find you physically attractive enough so your personality matters. So whenever they tell you use game and then their comeback is it's a numbers game, that shows you game doesn't actually work. If anything, you are playing her game, right? You are doing enough things to where she will entertain you or the possibility of being with you, but if you don't come off as physically attractive, you dang well better have very high status or a lot of money, because let me tell you, your personality doesn't mean that much if you ain't sexy, you ain't physically appealing. Once you come to that realization, it's going to make you a much more mature person, and it makes dating a lot easier, whether it's online or in person. On a final note, if you say, oh, I totally gamed this chick, but in reality you were just providing her with drugs and she got high, or you were getting her wasted drunk, that's not game. That's you taking advantage of someone who's inebriated. In fact, I think the majority of hookups are tied to alcohol at some level, and there are indications that women will sleep with men they don't find attractive if they're drunk. That's why in the Lisa Wade book, which is a big red pill called American Hookup, there are girls at college saying to their friends, if I have too many drinks, make sure I don't hook up with a guy who's unattractive, only hot dudes, because I don't want to damage my reputation. So you see how relevant these dynamics are. It doesn't mean you have to give up, and if you're not a Chad, you'll never get a woman, but just appreciate them and learn from them so you don't go around being delusional about, oh, this girl's drunk, therefore I had game. Well, try that same stuff on a woman who's not drunk and see how successful you are. That's really all it has to be said about game and personality.